Welcome to the Hospitality Maverick podcast with me, Michael Tingsær. We at Hospitality Mavericks are here to inspire leaders to create heart-centered and profitable businesses from the inside out, the kind that both employees and customers love and support. Thanks to BizSimply for sponsoring this episode as our show partner. And BizSimply is the all-in-one HR, workforce management, road and operations software designed and built by hospitality experts to make every shift run like clockwork. And we join forces to help the industry to find new ways to become even more innovative in how we lead our people, how we operate, to how we grow our businesses, to how we serve our customers. Together we want to share strategies and tools that can make the industry thrive long term, not just survive.
There's a real benefit to being authentic. And I say that as if you can control it. I mean, you are what you are. If you've gotten to that level, there's certainly a lot of good that got you there. Embrace it. Don't try to become somebody else. First of all, it's just too complicated, right? Who are you going to be? Just be who you are. Refine it. Make it digestible. Then surround yourself with people that embrace your values and your authenticity.
This is Lee Curtis, co-founder and CEO of RESIDE, and their purpose is to transform the way travel is purchased with a focus on delivering global travel solutions for companies through their curated platform. And in this conversation, we hear that Lee believes the traditional corporate housing industry is a state of evolution and being driven by the acceleration and interest in alternative ways of traveling, both when it comes to leisure and work. We talk about digital transformation in hospitality and importance about as an operator have a robust backend and make sure it stacks up when it comes to cybersecurity and safety. Lee also talks about ensuring that the human touch is available for customers when they need it, especially in those moments where they need certainty and have big questions they can't find via technology. Then is the time for humans to step in. He also talks about how hospitality sector needs really to adapt and lift sustainability agenda and contribute to solve the big problems of the world. Lee gets some great advice on leadership skills, especially around how it's important to show compassion right now in everything we do, and have in mind that people have been through a lot and there's more challenges coming ahead. Before you tune in, please sign up for a weekly newsletter packed with more Maverick insights, strategies and tools. Find the link in the show notes or visit hospitalitymavericks.com. There's also a free copy of the From Fragile to Agile white paper on bizsimply.com under the resource tab or via the link in the show notes. There will be some great insights and solutions in this white paper to improve your leadership game. Now, grab your notebook. There's some great leadership advice in here to navigate uncertainty and digital transformation. I'm super excited about today's conversation because we're going to be touching on an area that's been talked a lot about during the pandemic, the short stay model, and actually how that's competing with the traditional hotel market. And actually, there's a whole conversation about the way we go away from home, the way business travel is done. It's going to be different. And I already had a conversation with Lee, who is our guest today, and I know he's already have some very interesting things to share with you, but also that, the whole thing about the digital experience of this and how important that is, both for feeling safe, but also for feeling that we are having a special brand experience. And he's going to talk a bit about what they're doing on their platform as well, and other areas of the business. But I will let Lee talk much more about that. But first of all, Lee, thank you so much for coming on the show and welcome.
Michael, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed our pre-conversation. I look forward to the show.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that you are based in the US and I'm sitting here in the UK, and what we're going to be talking about today is like suddenly hospitality or hotels or whatever we're in, is just suddenly everything has just become global with the pandemic. Like we found out that we have some of the same challenges, the trends, some of the same things. And it feels like now we have become much more united as an industry, the hospitality industry. And I know you've been in your area of the sector you've been, most of your career as well. So it could be great to hear a bit more, Lee, so people get a bit of a picture about what is, what kind of business you're in, what is your background, and what's going on right now for you guys? Those three questions in one. I'll make sure we get all of it.
Well, and I'll tag on to what you just said. I agree. I think, it's more global. I think I'd even say it's the lines have become much more blurred between all the different hospitality products that are out there, and a lot of that driven. I mean, I think there was a movement toward my sector, what I would, you call it short term. I'd call it, alternative accommodations, but all of it is different than a hotel. But certainly highlighted by kind of the migration toward this model during the pandemic. But it was coming before that. But the brief, I think the quick background for me is, I represent a sector of the business, known more traditionally in the United States as corporate housing. Over in your neck of the woods, serviced apartments or service lets, apart hotels, in Europe, or on continental Europe and around the world, and executive residences in Asia, but all, fundamentally furnished apartments that offer hotel-like services. I've been doing this since 1994, so that just aged me tremendously. But I did start my career as believe it or not, as a bellman at a Hyatt hotel back in 1983. So, my roots have been hospitality through and through. I know we'll talk about leadership later, but just to kind of bookend that, although it's been a complete career in hospitality, I did have a concurrent career in the Army Reserves, as an officer, and did that for 12 years. And that actually intersects with a lot of how I do things. But yeah, currently the CEO and founder of RESIDE. RESIDE is a company that is, headquartered out in Seattle. The core of the company is a company known as Aboda. It's been around for over 30 years. It was born out of the necessity to house interns for Microsoft back when Microsoft was still brand new. That's our birthplace, if you will. And I'm proud to say that company has managed, before my leadership and after my leadership, to maintain that relationship as Microsoft's provider globally. That's a 30-year plus, award, if you will, that has taken, a lot of work and a lot of evolution to maintain. But it's, we're held to a very high standard, and, they go out to bid regularly. So, we have to re-earn it every few years. But that company, has been providing this more organic serviced apartment product, for all those years, right in Seattle. That was our core. That was our base. And to give you some sense of scale, Michael, because it gets lost in translation sometimes, it's a company that not only does it provide service apartments in that area, it's one of the most unique companies in the world in its ability to scale within 3 and 6 month intervals. So we would go from take the pandemic out of it, we would go from about 800 apartments to over 3,000 in 3 months, and then bring them all the way back down to 800 apartments. Our infrastructure allowed for that. Our back office, our warehousing, our trucks. We were able to do things that most people can't do, and it was unique, very unique to Seattle. But that was the core of our business for many years. And then the pivot to that has been what you see is 360, which is our tech platform, which is a global marketplace of compliant, vetted products that allow us to create a single source solution for our global clients for this product line. It primarily focuses on aggregating built for business style furnished apartments in all jurisdictions around the world. 60 countries. We've aggregated over 1 million styles of inventory, both, and as I say, deep and wide. Many quality offerings, but many price, in many geographies, and that's become a big driver of our business over the last, really the last 2 or 3 years.
Did that accelerate with the pandemic, where digitalization became even more important, and also knowing that, for example, very basic need, it was safe, and when I go here, I know they done the vetting. I know that it's gonna be working when I arriving.
Yeah, I want to. Uh, there's an accountability that I think is critical when you're facing, whether it's a client or a customer, right? My company is really more of an enterprise facing business to business platform. This is what we focus on, and within the context of being that sort of provider, you're held to a standard that comes from procurement, from risk management, from legal, and HR. So you're dealing with the soft side of it, which is comfort and quality. You're dealing with the hard side of it, which is compliance and vetting. If I'm going to be edgy on this podcast at all, I'm going to say I'm a little disappointed in the proliferation of platforms that have come out to aggregate this style of product that aren't putting any attention to the back end of the legalities of the business, the safety of the business. It's not just about creating a marketplace and pushing inventory through, right? That's that to me is reckless, and I see a lot of it. We've taken a different path, and our path has an equal parts of the quality safety components, as well as the service, and to your point, the digitalization of the experience are all critical. But and I say that, and it gets lost on people. So the example I will give is, you know, our the back end of our system vets over 400,000 global databases against things like money laundering, sanctions, anti-bribery, trade compliance, insurance, tax evasion, tax fraud. So which sounds like, no, what do you worry about that, right? Well, you worry about it when someone from Seattle says we need to be in Nigeria for a month for our project. And I'm picking Nigeria, maybe right or wrong, but everyone has a view of Nigeria. You have to be very careful because it's not just the apartment, it's who owns the apartment. What company is managing that apartment? Are they on a sanction list? Have they been caught for bribery? Is it actually illegal as an American company to place somebody in that apartment? Right. And you don't get the benefit anymore of saying, well, I didn't know. Because it's available now. That information is available. So you used to be able to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know." Now people go to jail for that stuff. I mean, sanctions are the United States' favorite weapon. So, you don't always know where the sanctions have been applied. We always think it's the Middle East, and their sanctions are placed all over this world. So just knowing that is important. And again, it protects the company, my company, and it also protects the company I'm working with. And that's just one example. But it's critical. And if people should, as I say when we kind of pitch our product, you should be losing sleep every night if your supplier isn't doing this for you.
It's super interesting because we done a bit of research on digital transformation in hospitality, and especially around restaurants, and some of them have now, after they deployed a lot of technology, not so much marketplace, maybe order alignment, but suddenly they stand with this thing. They have all this customer data as well. So this, cybersecurity issue suddenly, because suddenly they look into other industries where they've been hacked, banks and so on. So why should our be safe? And what is done to make our data safe? Because you can almost kill the business if you don't get this right.
Well, I can assure you, given our, given the client base that we satisfy, that we serve, that their tolerance for a data breach is zero. There's no apology there. So again, as newcomers come into this space and it's very easy to build out a website and create the illusion of a marketplace, but the back end of it has to be as robust as the clients you're serving. And again, when you start talking about Fortune 100, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, their data protocols are way bigger than most people can imagine. The money we spend on just being certified to work with some of these accounts would put most companies out of business. And so it's certainly it's a barrier to entry to some extent to go after those clients. But I think it's very misunderstood how serious these companies take it. And, as we were talking about earlier about legalities, right? They don't really realize the downward pressure that can come from an organization if you fail them in that. And it's so much more complex than, did you write a password on a sticky pad and stick it on your computer? I mean, it's, some of our relationships with our clients actually guide our protocols, whether it's how, what systems we use to how we use those systems. Because again, when you start to interface with these companies, you cannot be the weak link in. And again, their tolerance is pretty close to zero.
It's super interesting because, normally, let's say like digitalization in hospitality has always been my view is that has been a bit behind, and now we're catching up. And what normally happens when something catch up in society, law also become more complex and more consequences get higher. Suddenly it will catch up. In the beginning, it's a bit behind and it's a bit the Wild West, and platforms can do this or any other new invention have more wiggle room. But suddenly it becomes, from a business point of view, and what you need to know, sometimes it can be quite challenging. Have you seen this as well, as you've been in the industry and worked with this platform over the last 3 years? Suddenly, compliance and law across the world is catching up with tech and actually demands other things. You're seeing, totally other example, Facebook now being a bit challenged. Yeah.
I was just thinking about that, right? I mean, something as simple as a social network obviously became a behemoth and kind of lost track of what it was meant to be, right? And I mean, there's a lot to come out of that. So, but yeah, that's a great example. I think there's one of the roles I've had the privilege of sitting in has been the chair of CHPA, the chairman of CHPA, on and off for the last 15 years. And during one of those stints, we actually employed a futurist. His name's Brian David Johnson. By the way, I'll send you his name because you should get him on your show. You'd love to have him. He's a genius futurist out of Arizona State or ASU. But anyway, his whole thing on platforms and technology is it's never the thing, it's the thing after the thing, which is always in my mind, right? Like everyone gets caught up in, like in Uber, in Lyft. Well, they're a placeholder for an idea because the idea that'll actually stick is probably after them, right? Because technology will overtake that. There's a different technology coming, whether it's blockchain or some of the more, intricate technologies that may emerge. Or the convergence of just nanotechnology, all of it is it could change that, right? And everything that's out there, whether it's eBay as a marketplace or anything, and there's the thing after the thing. So I always keep that in mind when I think of these, what happens, because the thing after thing is going to address what happens at the beginning of at the end of the cycle, which is governance compliance starts to collide with technology, right? So, and then that tech can't necessarily reverse engineer itself to meet those demands. So sometimes it's easier for the next person to look at that as an opportunity.
And again, you come from a more traditional face-to-face service model, and you've kept some of those legs within the business, and then you've gone into, in principle, I don't know if I'm getting this right, and you can correct me if this, but again, developing a tech business in principle within that. How that, for you as a leader as well and the team, how that been doing that transition? Because from my view, it's very different. It's a business model, but it's a very different skill set and thinking that needs to build a technological platform and providing a service. Service is difficult to scale, even though you said you found the right way of scaling up and down. But this is actually where many service businesses dies, is to scale up and down is the challenge, or the founder can only be, or the culture can only be copied so well.
Well, one thing I'll go back in time for a minute and say that my first conversation or my first real entry into technology was when I was CEO of Bridge Street back in 2000 and trying to think the year, like 2003, 4. we developed what I consider to be the original platform. It's called Easy Source. It really spurned for our sector. It became kind of the original template of a marketplace. Now, nothing like they look today, but all of them came out of it. Epic came out of it. Relo Quest came out of it. All of them took that idea and reverse engineered it and improved upon it. Frankly, which is when I went over to Aboda to kind of lead that technological charge. I did the same thing. I took the idea of a marketplace, but said, how can I make it better for today's world, right? When choice isn't the primary key. It's a key, but not the primary key. So I did have that business line, and it was a very successful business line in my last company, but it was a complementary business line. The core was the OpCo. And then I went to Aboda, and then as part of the transaction from Aboda to Reside, which was when I partnered up with a private equity firm, and we bought Aboda, and with the idea of growing Reside through technology. It was a pivot, and you're right, it was a pivot in intellect, where the corporate housing business, if you will, the short-term rental business, was really a very close first cousin to hospitality. So all the same features are there, right? You got to have a well-appointed apartment. You got to clean it. You got to maintain it. You got to be available for service. All those, it's got a little bit longer window to it, but it's the same. It's a hospitality product. And then, this 360 platform really took off in the last couple of years, and it's become the bigger part of our business. So we've actually had to start looking at the company as two companies. Because the skill sets are very different, in managing and as part of our process, with 360, it's a curated, managed marketplace. So it's not Michael doesn't come on and find his own thing and just get it and he's left alone. That isn't what we're offering. What we're offering is complete program management for these large companies, where we give them the technological advantage of tech flow, but we hover over it at all times to make sure that this process, stays in line with expectations, but more importantly, just acknowledges the fact that on a 30 or 60-day stay, or just let's take it even back to a week or more can go wrong than if you're there for 2 days, right? So, and then you start to, the further that length of stay goes out, the more opportunity there's for things to go wrong, but there's more opportunities for things to collide with the fact that you're in another country for an extended period of time, right? You're in Denmark for 2 months, right? And you need help. And, so we've had to build the system to be very responsive, but we've also kept, very human touch type elements in place. As digital as the world gets, when things go bad, when you make a call, right, you really want someone there, and you don't want to go to a phone tree to get it, and you don't want to feel like you've been outsourced to some other country for the night. So part of our value proposition is we have a 24-hour man call center in Seattle, and it's our people answering the phone, solving problems. It's a safety net, but it's important. So we're always trying to keep that human element into the transaction, because our transaction is very different than a hotel transaction, right? That length of stay, that cost, all those features change the mindset of the buyer. And everything we've done has been to kind of rather than convince them that there's a better way they don't know about, we developed a better way, but also give them the comforts of what they're used to. And time will tell how far digitization goes to remove the human element from the transaction. I'm a little more, as we were talking about, I'm just, if I had hair, it would be gray. And I'm gray enough to still be stubbornly thinking that the human customer still wants some good face-to-face service. And, in whatever fashion that means, they don't want to be thrown off into the bot world yet.
And it's very interesting because I had a situation where I needed to get something done with the bank while I was away, and normally everything goes on the phone. So I was very skeptical that I actually could get hold on something. And actually, positively enough, my bank, they picked up the phone straight away and they had my profile. They knew what I was doing straight away. I was not in the country, so that was even better, and I just felt they dealt with it. These things were sorted, the payment went through, all was great. And I was just like, it took me 5 minutes. But that I will never forget that, because I didn't want to wait somebody replying on an email. I wanted this sorted now, because it had a business consequence if it was not sorted now.
Yeah, and that's the perfect blend of technology and classic service, right? So the technology enhanced it, right? Because they had everything they needed right in front of them, to validate you, to do the transaction, and to take care of you. But you had a person that actually was trained to care and had the skill set to take care of your problem. That, to me, you know, that's the best definition of where technology can move hospitality forward, is always keeping in mind that blend, right? Enhance it where it can be enhanced, but protect it, because at the end of the day, you're being judged on service, not how slick your tech is. Um, and so that's a great example. That's a great example.
Yeah, and I often say that how can tech actually help, removing some of these low adding value tasks that is in hospitality, so actually the people can spend time on high value added tasks with this hospitality, communication, problem solving that, no algorithm can do, because they need to look at you and see how you are feeling in that situation to find out, okay, he needs a bit more safety, or he's okay, so we just give him a bit of direction, that reading that person element.
Yeah, and there's such a gradient of what I call travel skill set, right? So you're a global traveler, you're comfortable with it, right? You know how to navigate an airport, you know how to navigate, customs, you know how to navigate a city, and then you know how to navigate most hotels, right? And then so you're at the alpha level of traveler, and then there's people that don't know those things, and I watch it because I travel a lot. I've become more compassionate about it too. I feel sorry for people, as you see them struggle to figure out how to, like the tube system in London. You need a PhD to figure that out. And I feel sorry for people that, you just watch them struggle staring, right, and looking at the map, and getting into a hotel and not really understanding the difference of the hotels and how people operate. All of it can be overwhelming, right? And you need to have people that are still there that can help guide you.
And it's quite interesting, because I was just, as I told you before, when I was on a trip to Denmark. I was seeing some family, and then we had a hotel stay before we had to go on the plane in Copenhagen. And this hotel, I hadn't seen that before book, and I don't mind. You can only check in by yourself. There's like, kiosk check in. I'm totally fine with that. I was just there, arriving late, just needed a bed, and then we early up next morning and off. But I was like some elderly couples there, a couple that was coming at the same time, and I could just see they didn't know what to do. And it's not because they don't have an iPhone and all that, but suddenly, what is this? I never experienced this before. And it was, of course, very small in the description when you ordered that there's only online check-in. There's no human being. You can go at a bell over in the corner and ring, and somebody will come. So we helped them and all that. But again, it just shows you the importance of, you cannot. It's great, it looks good at the bottom line, but it can maybe destroy your brand if you're not aware. Again, as you say, there's different travel levels and technology adaptation. Even though we become better with the pandemic, everybody was forced to go on a Zoom. Even my parents could do Zoom now. That was not something.
Yeah, I think the error that's being made in the evolution of technology, especially in hospitality, is this assumption, and you said it, that everyone has it and everyone knows how to use it, and that everyone is somehow, under the age of 35 when they travel, right? So all of this is great, and the major buying power still sits, in the plus 50. And at that range, there's a real gradient again of technological, prowess. Some people, I have an 84-year-old dad who has an iPhone, but it's only two things to him, right? It's text and phone. Don't assume because he has it, he can work an app. And these are the things that we have to be really careful about, and maybe not forever, but certainly for the next 20 or 30 years. Don't forget the people that don't have those skills, because you'll alienate them.
Yeah, and I guess it comes the same with your employees. I have a lot of conversation with CEOs. You're choosing some tech, but you haven't actually tested out if the people are ready for it. Oh, they know how to use it. They are young.
That's where I have to stay the voice of reason, and again, that's that age range, right? So I'm protecting the baby boomers out there.
What mega trends are you seeing in the sector you're in right now? What is happening? What is like the moving things that really moves fast right now?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, and again, I'll speak from the angle of short-term rental, alternative accommodations, corporate housing. I'll put that furnished group into one bubble just for the sake of the conversation. But I think and you probably and I don't think I'm gonna say anything you haven't heard either. But I think this kind of two things kind of collided during the pandemic. This idea of work and play, biz leisure, as I call it, as others call it, but this idea of extended travel where you both, you're going somewhere to work, or taking holiday to work, but also, doing both, which is very much an American thing to do because you know, I had my office in London for long enough to know that when the Brits take off on holiday, they actually mean it. I mean, I don't even know if they bring their phones with them, right? So they're gone for 2 weeks. Over here, it's always kind of been a little bit of both. But I think, from an American side of things, you're seeing a lot more people embrace what was kind of previously reserved for the gig workers, where the gig workers, have kind of over the last 5 or 10 years kind of perfected the idea of living and working abroad, being connected via remote, and no one was the wiser. And I think I saw it even with my own team. I remember doing executive calls in the middle of the pandemic where one of my executives was in the back of her RV, in the middle of Wyoming, doing her work. I didn't care where she was, right? As long as the work's getting done. And I think we're a lot more, as leaders, we're a lot more open to that. And I think that you're seeing a lot more, companies, allowing their senior people and the people that they can, keep where their accountability levels are pretty high, do these things. So, go to, and even on the short level, go to Paris to work for a week and spend 4 days, on holiday and then come home, which is essentially what I used to do. But you do both. And I think I think people have now experienced that. And I think also, and I have to kind of give a nod, whether it's popular or unpopular, to Airbnb, to say they really opened the eyes of the world to this idea of of this of furnished products that are not hotels. And they opened they opened up a big, you know um, uh, buying population that hadn't considered it, and now have learned about it and are interested in it. Now there's also the other side of that, which is you're dealing, where the hoteliers will say, well, it's an inconsistent product, it's inconsistent experience, and they're right across the board. Some people are fine with that. I think that's where you're starting to watch different styles of marketplaces emerge that filter the noise out on something as big as Airbnb. I would say from a business side, we're one of those. 360 is actually, taking even out of the Airbnb universe through some of their superhost products that look and feel more business, and bringing them into our ecosystem for distribution, right? We're putting a layer of compliance and duty of care on top of it. But 5 years ago, I would have sat there and had to explain for half an hour what this idea was or what this product was. Now everyone just gets it, right? And again, depending on your experience with Airbnb, you either got it in a good way or got it in a bad way, right? And I think that's their danger. You get one of the bad stays, and you're like, I'm not doing that again. And I think they're going to be up against that, because they don't really have that much control over their hosts. And as much as they try to get the business piece fine tuned, they're still not controlling the host outcome as much as they would like. So I think that's one mega trend. I think something that is really kind of coming forth, I think a lot more, and we talked about it at the beginning before the call started, was the climate. And I think there's been a lot of lip service given to sustainability and the climate for years. I think, you know, it, you're going to see more real action coming from our sector, the hospitality sector, around how to create more sustainable stays. And it won't just be we don't wash your towels for a week like they do in a lot of hotels, but it'll be other things. How they purchase, what they purchase, FF&E, right? There's an entire emerging industry around FF&E that's sustainable. And it just goes on and on and on. And I think it's finally going to collide with the P&L, because I don't think it's going to save people money. Companies aren't going to save money by becoming sustainable, but they're not going to have a choice anymore. And I think that it's going to be interesting to watch what comes out of that. I don't have a beat on it, but things will disrupt off of it, because I could see big companies like any of the Fortune 500 going to RFP saying you must be X sustainable by this period. You must reduce your carbon footprint as a corporate goal over the next 3 years by this much. And and the tail will start to wag the dog on this whole idea. I think you're finally going to see that happen.
What about if we go from the trends? What have been you're referring back to the last 18 months? What has been your biggest learning in all this? What are you taking with you on the other side of a pandemic? I don't think it's over yet.
No, I wish we were over. It's very frustrating. I remember sitting here this time last year doing planning for the next year and being so excited that we had a vaccine. And just in my head, and by the way, I've been wrong for this entire pandemic. So I thought it was going to be over sooner. I thought the vaccine was going to solve the problem, but it didn't. It certainly helped, but I never thought we'd have a population that said no. And then, obviously the Delta variant, and then I think the reaction, because there's two reaction levels. And I'll say this, it's not the question, but I'll say this from just being someone that's been traveling since last July. The airports are full. And if you just traveled, I have to think if you went through Heathrow, it was pretty full. The traveler is ready to travel. The business traveler is ready to travel. The only thing holding everyone back and to get back to normal is the companies that run the companies that make the decisions, and the governments that are barring it. But if you ask the traveling population, the road warriors and everyone else that fuels this global economy, they're ready to go. And they've been traveling as much as they can. So I think, that's interesting. And, I think I learned, if I'm just talking about learnings from my business, I was super surprised by the resiliency of the sector during COVID. There were a few companies that went out of business, but not many. And I think it confirmed something I wondered about, mission critical travel, because when the world shut down, it didn't shut down, right? A lot of hotels went to zero, but our industry stayed pretty flat. It didn't grow, but it didn't collapse either, which meant there was a lot of people staying for a week or longer, being pushed into areas because they were mission critical, whether it was across the globe or across the country. These projects that demand this longer travel, there was an element of those that just had to keep happening. And I found that interesting. I braced for the worst, and I was surprised, because in the midst of that, we turned 360 on to our biggest clients, and it was gangbusters busy through, not to historic levels, but way more than I thought it would be. So that was interesting. The resiliency of the business was interesting. I think as time has gone on, this idea of permanent remote work, I think, is becoming interesting. I think there's CEOs that will say it and they don't really mean it. And then there's CEOs like me that won't say it because I don't believe it's the answer. I think we've learned we can be remote. I think we've learned we can be flexible. But again, I'm a humanist at heart. And I think, the power of 1 + 1 = 3 when you put two people together. And I think there's only so much we can do over video. And that there's an X factor in there. that you can't ignore. And I'm seeing it, as our businesses is opening in Seattle. I've opened the offices, closed the offices, opened them, because I keep getting told different things. But when we're together, the things that it's the little things. Like when I go all the way back in time to the birth of my original platform, with my then business partner John Wolfert, the idea of a marketplace for corporate housing and making it merit based and all these things was because he and I were sitting there together, just lamenting about something we couldn't get done with a client. We just lamenting, right? You don't you don't call someone on video and lament typically. So, you know, so I think, I've learned that as time has gone on, I think everything comes back to the mean. I think as we get past this next year, you'll find more and more people coming back to the office, wanting to come back. And I think you're going to see some CEOs that made some pretty bold statements have to walk it back.
Yeah, because I guess it's the culture piece again, as you're touching on as well, and the relationships that we as a human we hunger for that as well, and I guess that of course we want the freedom to operate, but also we know the really great ideas is actually happening when we come together in a way.
I think the thing that's interesting to watch is because it's been clear during this pandemic, clearer than ever in the history of the world, that there are always winners and losers in everything. And I think and why we're seeing such a labor crisis at the very basic levels of service in this world is they're frustrated that they don't get those, that they don't get to just you know grab a computer and go somewhere and drink coffee and make money, right? I think it's frustrating for a whole group of people now that didn't really understand that before, right? They looked at people going, "Oh my God, they got to go to that big office and sitting there all day. That sucks. I'd rather be making coffee," right? And I think there's still a psychological backlash that's still yet to be understood, which is why a lot of people haven't gone back to work. I think they're like, "Well, that I don't want to do that," but unfortunately they don't, they're not positioned to do anything else. So our baseline labor force is highly challenged right now because I think there's a lot of that going on.
So, Lee, on this amazing journey you've been on, over the years, like there must be some people that has really influenced you and made you an entrepreneur and CEO, and took you to where you were. You said something really interesting to me as we were starting this conversation. Time becomes your friends over years as a CEO. Before, probably I said a bit like I felt always time was almost against me. Couldn't go fast enough.
Yeah, no, it does. I think it's the beauty of patience and age. It's like when you watch if any like pro athlete who's just kind of tipping into the end of their career, right? They don't move as fast, but they're there's a word called cagey, right? They can do things, right? I mean, Michael Jordan at the end of his
Yeah,
career could still shoot.
I was thinking exactly him. Yeah.
Yeah, he still scored 50 points on New Year's Eve, but doing it very differently than he did, before. And I think it's because the game slows down a little bit, like you were talking about, like you don't feel rushed. It's funny, your question, I would answer your question differently when I was a younger CEO, because I'd feel pressure to answer it smart. It's like the dinner game. Who would you have dinner with, if you could have dinner? And everyone wants to say, well, Gandhi, and you know, and I'm like, well, that's bullshit. I'd want to have Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra and Gene Simmons. I think that would be a fun dinner party. But I will say this, because I think as I have gotten older, I've become more in tune with what has driven me, and there's things that and I guess lecture at university sometime at my alma mater, so I say these to the kids, right? But I one of the things I talk about is persistence and resilience, right? Just working hard, outworking everybody, first and foremost, 'cause that's the thing everyone can bring to the table. I'm going to I have to give my shout out on that to my mom. My mother is an influencer, and I wouldn't have said that before, but as I've gotten older and I've watched her age and lived through remarkable health issues and still in her mid 80s, be curious and still a driving force in the family. She weighs all of 70 pounds. She's from South America. She's an immigrant. She came here 65 years ago. And every time I talk to her, and she's just relentless, right? Like she just has an agenda. And my wife tells me that all the time. She goes, "You never stop." Like just the little things. And that's how I run the company. Like just because I haven't sent you a note doesn't mean I'm not still thinking and following up. But I think there's a positivity that comes from that, right? Like if things get done. And so I'm going to have to give my shout out to my mom on that one. And I'm just keeping it on the light side. I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan, but if you are, you know who Jean-Luc Picard is, right? And all joking aside, there's a dignity to the position that he carried in that series, and I think there's actually been books written about it, management books, but about his style, very inclusive, but very firm, right? Very like standards were understood, and he didn't have to be mean to do it. So there's a lot of great examples, I'm sure, in the real world, but I think he's an interesting one to model after, because there's again, I want to use the word dignity, integrity, right, that he brought to it. But I think taking it to business, I would flip over to Steve Jobs, and not because of the iPhone, but again, if he really, I mean, he got kicked out of his own company, right? And let's face it, he's not a model citizen, by any means on a lot of things, but he came, he did Pixar, he comes back, he saves the company, right? And he takes it to the next level. And I think that's an awesome story, about leadership and persistence and entrepreneurship, passion, all those things are embodied. And, yes, there's ego in there, but if you consult, if you have a CEO or founder that tells you they don't have an ego, they're lying to you. Right? They have to have one. How you use it is going to separate you from being one of the good guys or the bad guys. But he's an interesting one just for all those things. And it could have not been the iPhone. It could have been a million things, how he did it. And I especially like his second act, when he comes back, and takes Apple to the next place, and now has changed the world. The first time around, he didn't really change the world, right? Now he's changed the world, and that's a pretty cool legacy. So those would be my three. I mean, maybe Michael Scott from The Office, just for comedy, but
How not to do it? Yeah,
how not to do. Well, but his heart was always in the right place.
yeah,
right?
exactly. You're right about that.
That's the conundrum of The Office, is the heart was always in the right place.
Yeah, but the execution was a bit poor. I know we have the English version called The Office as well, with a guy called David Brent.
Oh yeah.
And
It was the best. By the way, it was the best one. The English version was, I thought, much funnier. But you have to understand the British humor, I think, to get it.
Yeah, and understand the British office life as well.
Which I do. I spent way too many years in a British office, and no offense, but I'd rather not do that again.
How have you, and how do you now actually show up, strong? I call it show up pro every day. How do you keep fresh, and have the capacity to deal with, because you have also been hit by lots of challenges in it, and you always in the top in organization, there's always a lot of pressure coming from every side.
Yeah, again, I'm really blessed that in this current version of my company, the people I've assembled are very deliberately chosen people, right? So they came from my other companies, and I really, really care for them and like them, so we can operate a little looser, kind of like the Rolling Stones on tour, right? They've just we know each other a long time, and we can all kind of, we're pretty authentic with each other. We can, I don't run an iron fist company, so if they have something to say to me, they need to say it, and they will. So I look forward to the interactions. I love what I do, so that helps. You got to have passion for what you do. I'm a voracious reader, so I'm constantly challenging myself to learn more and think different. And I get excited about things that I stumble into. whether it's off my Apple feed or other things I read. I'm always trying to bring them back to business and find new ways to push the needle a little bit, because at this point, it's incremental improvement to the business that drives it. There's not a lot of silver bullets lying around. So you got to find ways to get, as my company gets bigger, try to keep them all engaged. Try to, the CEO's job is many things. Entertain them, educate them, mentor them. Lead them, and I find that to be a very fulfilling challenge. So I think showing up pro is, you got, I don't know how you would do anything if you didn't love it. So I just, it's so hard for me to intellectualize, how, like do it, like even this, right? I couldn't do this if I didn't like what I did or love what I did. So I think you got to have some drive, passion. If this is just a job, this is a hard life. And I've been blessed. I've been blessed that everything I've done has been an enjoyment, whether it was the Army, whether it was even my early days in hospitality. I mean, being a bellman, I could write a book about that, right? That was fun. Walking people at midnight in a convention hotel, not so fun, but when it was over, it was still pretty cool that you'd got through it. So, all of those are pretty interesting, tidbits to the career.
It's funny when I get that answer as well. I actually always goes back to one of my first job as a general manager in a cafe. That was my best job, like, and it was just because it was the right mix of people and there was so many things. And in a way, the challenge and the expectation was beautiful balance for where I was in my life. So it's just like you had this moment. Also, you were talking with a lot of interesting people because we're in an interesting place where there's a lot of interesting business people. And that was actually probably where I got some of the hunch from. I wanted to go and do my own things as I do today. So yeah, you're right. Sometimes, it's about, you need to enjoy the moment you are in that space, because then it will take you to the next space instead of thinking about what it could be. And you have to enjoy things, or go and do something else. Life is too short.
It's well said.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end here, Lee, and I know you have a day in front of you where, as we are shutting down things over here in Britain, and you're almost just your early morning there in the US. But what three advice would you give to leaders out there if I give you the stage? If you think about just in general, how should we enter? It's so difficult to say when we're into something new in this world, but like this feels like we are on our way into a new paradigm, especially in hospitality. What would your top three advice be?
It's a good question. And again, some of it you may have heard me already talk about, but I think, I'll start with, as a leader, regardless of what crisis you're going through or what ups and downs you're going through, there's a real benefit to being authentic. And I say that as if you can control it. I mean, you are what you are. If you've gotten to that level, there's certainly a lot of good that got you there. Embrace it. Don't try to become somebody else. First of all, it's just too complicated, right? Who are you going to be for this call? Just be who you are. Refine it. Make it digestible to the extent that people understand it. But be authentic, and then surround yourself with people that embrace your values, and your authenticity, and try to build a team around that. I think that's important, and especially became more important during the stress of the last 18 months. I think it became more clear to me, that when being in the middle of a very unknown global crisis that we can now look back on and think differently about, but when we were in it, it was very scary. Mental health was being challenged. People's beliefs were being challenged, and you had to, I think more now than ever, you had to, show the compassion, for your fellow human being as a human being, not just as someone that works for you. So I think compassion, that everyone's talking about emotional IQ right now, and I think it's the right thing to talk about. I think people, if you want to hire and retain, people need to feel like they're part of something. They don't want to be a drone, and if you treat them like one, you won't have them. As I was given a lecture the other day talking about different leadership styles, and they all work. I mean, I mean, Bezos has a different style than Musk, than Branson, right? They're all different characters. But who's the one, where do you want to work? Just because you're successful doesn't make it the best place. And like go back 30 years, and maybe the answer I would have given you for who's influenced me would have been Jack Welch or Lee, right? Well, Jack Welch wouldn't last 10 minutes in an office today. He'd be thrown out, right? That behavior is no longer acceptable. So I think so the world has changed, and I think it's okay to be more compassionate in how you lead. And then just lead from the front. I think you're if anything during this COVID environment, you needed to be out front. People need to hear from you. They need to know what you're thinking. All these things conspire to help people better. Um, you know, um, you know, they're better prepared to deal with what's coming when they know where their leader stands. And I think it's important to try to break through that as much as you can. Listen, it's impossible to make everybody happy or to say all the right things to everybody. But again, if you're authentic about it, then you don't have to apologize for it. They'll come to you versus you have to figure out how to get to them.
It was like two really interesting things you said. I've been talking with a couple of founder CEOs recently. Is that thing that actually, you're not perfect. It's actually okay to make a mistake, but just as long as you go back and said, I actually acknowledge I made a mistake. I've reflected on it. I'm very sorry that, of course you can't. It's like the trust barrier. You can't do that every second minute. But again, like that's being authentic. It's actually being reflective about your own behavior and actually, stopping up, even if it can go a week and then suddenly the penny drops and you say, uh-oh, I made some, because you read a book or you listen to a podcast, whatever you do, and you're thinking, wow, you can still go back and say, I've been wrong, because that really brings the trust barrier up. And then I think the element you said about Jack Welch is quite interesting, because I can still remember working and actually a lot of people thought that with the 10%, just cut the 10%. That was a great idea. And it almost became a bit like, it became a practice in a way. And you thought, wow. So, and then people said it works, because people got shit scared. That was what happened. There's fear. And I think, and you're totally right, today's environment, and you can see it with the labor shortage we have. This top-down model, which is Jack Welch, is the power is at the center, and you have to fear the top of the center here, because if you don't deliver, you'll be out. You don't even know if you deliver, because sometimes you're just out because we need some more. We need 10% to go. So, and it's so interesting that these shifts are now coming, and if you are not believing that, I'll call it the Jack Welch model, or the industrial model of you are the commander, and you throw orders down the Christmas tree leadership, I call it as well, where everything just slides down from the top of the star. Then I don't think you're in business for a very long time. In the
well,
future.
I mean, look at in your country. I mean, the UK here. I mean, the growth of the unions are exactly in retaliation to that sort of behavior, right? The union, someone had to protect, the worker, because of that industrial. Use the right word, that industrial style of hierarchy. That just doesn't. It just doesn't work anymore. And I mean, I was thinking the other day about, I used to work in Dallas for a while, and it's a company called EDS that regularly once a year they would have all their employees in the building come to an auditorium with a box full of all their office stuff, because they were going to do the 10%, and you didn't. So you came in not knowing, and then they call the 10%'s names, and the rest went back to their offices. I mean, how freaking unmotivating. I mean, I don't even know how you do it, right? Like, so I'm pretty sure they don't do that anymore.
Yeah, let's hope. Yeah.
Well, let's hope for sure.
Else you're out of business if you're listening in at some point very soon. Thank you so much, Lee. It's been a really interesting conversation. Lots of great advice out there. Where can people find you if they want to know more about you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. It's just one way, right? Just look me up, Lee Curtis, Reside, and then www.staywithreside.com is our site. Those are the easiest ways.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Lee. I wish you and the team good luck and power and energy for the time ahead.
Absolutely. Thanks. You too. Happy holidays.
Thank you so much, Lee, for your great insight on the future of hospitality, digital transformation, and your great leadership advice. I would recommend you now to ask yourself, do we have enough human touch on our digital experience? To get further inspiration on how to boost your service apartment business, tune in to episode 88 with Larry Corman, president of AKA Hotel Residence, on Being 3D. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, please share, rate, review, or subscribe to one of our channels. A big thank you to BizSimply for supporting us, bringing great insights, strategies, and tools to help the industry thrive, not just survive. Check them out at bizsimply.com or on their social at BizSimply or BizSimplyAQ. You can also email them directly on advice@bizsimply.com. Remember to download your free copy on Fragile to Agile, either under the resource tab on bizsimply.com or via the link in the show notes. And we have some great insights in there and solutions to improve your leadership game. Big thank you to Fina Charlson, the show producer and editor from the Podcast Collective. Tune in next time for another interview, and in the meantime, find out more about us and subscribe to the newsletter and download free leadership tools at hospitalitymavericks.com. And don't worry, if you didn't get all of this, there will be links in the show notes. I'm Michael Tingsager, and you've been listening to the Hospitality Maverick podcast. Be Maverick!